Hi, my name is Pamela Fuselli, and I'm the host of Popping the Bubble Wrap. Are you the person in your family who worries about the safety of others, about buying safety products and using them? Are you yelling, "Yes, that's me"? Then this is the podcast for you. Raising a child or children can be a hair-raising undertaking, and keeping them safe is your priority. Parachute's Popping the Bubble Wrap podcast explores what you really need to think about and provides easy tips on prevention strategies. No bubble wrap here, though. By this point, you're well into the journey of car seat safety for your child. You've wrangled the rear-facing and forward-facing car seats into the car and your child into those seats. Well done. We have just one final stage left to take on, and that's the booster seat. So what are the special considerations you need to be aware of when it comes to booster seats? How do they work? Because they do look and function differently than the other seats. Where should you install them? When is your child ready to move into a booster seat or out of a booster seat? Today, we're going to talk about it. Everything you need to know about selecting, installing, using a booster seat. I'm happy to have parents Jane Morsch and Alva Bork, as well as our expert Catherine Hutka, president of the Child Passenger Safety Association of Canada, joining me today. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me here. Thank you.
So Alva and Jane, you both have children who are either ready to get into a booster seat or transitioning in and out of a booster seat. Alva, I know you have an older child as well. I'm sure you have lots of questions that all parents will want to know the answers to. So let's not waste any time. We will start with your questions. Jane, what is one of your burning questions? I know you have a lot of them.
I have so many burning questions. My big one is, so my child's 4. I just weighed him. I know he's 55 pounds. He's currently in like a rear-facing harness car seat. When do I move him into a booster? Because technically on looking at my booster, it says 40 pounds, but I've also read that keeping in the car seat safer. What do I do? When do I move him?
So these are all great questions, and they're not just questions that you're asking. They're questions that lots of parents are asking. So you'd said he was 55 pounds?
He is.
So I think you'd misspoke and said that he was in a rear-facing car seat, but I would expect he'd be in a forward-facing car seat now. Yeah.
Yep.
Just because the max weight they have for those in Canada is 50 pounds. But yeah, so he would be in his forward-facing car seat, and you had said you had a car seat that kind of went through all of the stages. You had called it like a 4-in-1?
It's a 4-in-1 forever car seat.
Right. Okay. So different car seats call them different things. Sometimes they'll say 2-in-1, 3-in-1, 4-in-1. Generally the kind of car seat that you have, we'd call an all-in-one because it would go for a rear-facing stage. And now, of course, you've transferred him over into the forward-facing stage. And now you're wondering, when does he move to a booster stage? And you figured out already that your car seat has some overlap. So your particular car seat, and many other people's car seats as well, may have a harness weight. That maybe you could safely use that harness up until, 50 or 55, or in this case, 65 pounds. And then, like you said, when you were reading it in booster mode, you noticed that in booster mode, it does start at 40 pounds. So that's where we're going to start. So 40 pounds, there are no booster seats that can be used before 40 pounds in Canada. So 40 pounds is our minimum. So, we have some kids that are really tiny. I know we're going to talk to Alva later, and I know Alva's daughter it was a really long time before she hit that 40 pounds. And for your son, he has surpassed that 40 pounds. So that's the first thing we're going to look for. The second thing we're going to look for is whether or not they meet that height and weight and like the dimensions for that car seat and booster seat mode. So do they yet meet that booster seat for all of the other requirements that it might have? So for height and weight and fit and how it's going to fit. And we're also looking for your kiddo, I would wait until they had outgrown that car seat. And so when are they outgrown their forward-facing car seat? They're outgrown their forward-facing car seat when they meet either the height or the weight or a fit requirement for their seat. So when they've outgrown that car seat, that's when you'd start to look for it. So in your case, you can keep him forward-facing and buckled in that car seat for as long as he still meets the height and weight and fit requirements for that seat. And so he might outgrow it by weight and he might outgrow it by height. So for a forward-facing car seat, you have to have the harness at or above a child's shoulders. And once it starts to go below, that's when they've outgrown it by that fit requirement as well. So if they were in a car seat that only went to 40 pounds, say, or if they were in a car seat that had a much shorter height, we might even say, well, maybe they need a car seat that goes to a higher weight or a higher height. They might not be ready for a booster, which brings us to booster seat readiness. So we know that young children may have a difficult time sitting still, keeping buckled, keeping in that position. And in a forward-facing harness car seat, completely buckled up, the adult is responsible for their safety. They have completely buckled them up. They're not going anywhere. That's where they stay. Whereas when you've moved them to a booster seat, generally the seatbelt isn't locked. It's flexible. They can move forward. They could move back. They could move to the side. They could fall asleep. They could slide out under it. They could slump. They could unbuckle and leave the car. The safety is more up to them. And so that developmental requirement, all of the other ones are on the stickers. All of the other ones are on the internet. All of the other ones are more clear, but only you can know when your child reaches that developmental stage where you can of course, you're going to help them buckle, especially a 4 or 5 or 6-year-old. You're going to always help them buckle, but are they going to be able to stay in that booster seat? And so that development comes at different times for different ages of children. I think it's rare before 5. We do have, many booster seats will have an age minimum of 4 years old on the side of them. But even then, I've seen research that was done on 4-year-olds seated in a booster seat for 30 minutes, and they had cameras on them. And they found that even within that 30 minutes, they didn't stay safely buckled in the right position to stay safe in their booster seat. And so that maturity might come a little later. So for some, it might be 5, 6, or even 7 years old before they're able to sit in that booster seat correctly without leaning out, without moving that shoulder belt to behind their back or under their arm or somewhere else that it wouldn't protect them. And so that's the more difficult part. And I think that's probably where you're at, Jane, where you've got a kiddo who, still fits in their harnessed car seat, but it's possible that some of his friends are moving to the booster seat. And so you're wondering, when are we going to the booster seat? When are we going to make this switch?
And that's a good question, right? It's we'd love to be able to give an age, this age, put them in this car seat, but really, the height and weight is a better metric, but you also have to think about that developmental stage. And Alva, I know you have a couple of questions as well, and you have a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old, correct? So you've got one at one end of the spectrum and one at the other. So it's like, when do you get in? And, you may have a question about when you get out as well, but go ahead and please ask your question.
So my first question is, I've always wondered, is the high back more safe than the low back booster? Because we do have a high back booster, but also we use a low back booster when we travel, as it would be harder to carry your high back booster. So I've always wondered, right? And like right now, my 10-year-old is in a high back booster. So she's already 10 and she's like, my friends are not in this anymore. And I'm like, well, do I have those thoughts of which is safer or they're both okay? That's my question.
Okay, so I know you had a very different situation from Jane in that you had a child who took a really long time to get to 40 pounds. So she didn't even get into a booster seat until she was much, much older. And if we had asked her to remain in her harness seat and for as long as she fit it, she might have been 9, but still fitting in that harness seat because she is a really petite child. So basically the thing about a high back booster is we do have some evidence that a high back booster offers more protection than a backless booster. In a crash scenario, we have some evidence of that. When do we absolutely need a high back booster would be a better question. So when the shoulder belt isn't positioned safely on the child's shoulder, maybe it's floating out away from their body, maybe the way the routing hardware in the vehicle has it down over their shoulder or up over their face. So that might be something that's really helpful to better position that shoulder. If it does have that positioner on the high back booster, it does offer some side impact protection because, with a backless booster, it would be just you and the door, right? So it does offer that. And the other reason that we find that, I would always want to transition a child from a harness car seat to a high back booster whenever possible, because it really does give them that sense of where they need to sit and where they need to stay. You can see 5 and 6-year-olds who are in a backless booster, and the whole back seat is the area where they go. They kind of like, they go over here, and now the seatbelt is over there, and it's not holding them in by their strongest bones. And so that is one of the reasons that a high back booster seat would be recommended. But the reason that it would be required is if there was no head support. So say you were in the middle seat of a back seat that doesn't have a headrest, and now you've bumped the child up in a booster seat where the tops of their ears are up over. So like where I am on the sofa here, I would need something behind to the tops of my ears to protect my head, right? So everything goes forward towards that most common point of impact. And then you want, when your head goes back, you want there to be a head restraint there as well. And so if there isn't one, if you're in a middle seat that doesn't have a head restraint, a high back booster seat would be required to keep that kiddo safe.
Right. Now, Jane, you had a question about, and I think that's a great segue into where should you put the booster seat and the type of car, right? So go ahead.
Yeah. So right now in our forward facing harnessed car seat.
Gotcha.
It's in the middle of my car. Because my husband looked online. He's like, no, this is the safest place for it. Unfortunately, he just bought his dream pickup truck and it can only go on the side. So it's in the side there. But like, what do we do with the booster? Is it also a middle? Are we even right that it's supposed to be in the middle?
All right. So here's what we know. So you don't get to pick your crash. Because, crashes can be different, but we know statistically speaking, the middle seat is the furthest point from any point of impact, right? So if you were hit by the side or rear-ended or, frontal impact, that middle seat is the furthest point from any impact. So we know that it can be the safest in a vehicle. When is the middle seat not the safest? So that's the question we'll answer. The middle seat is no longer the safest if there's a lap-only belt, for example. A booster seat must be used with a lap and shoulder belt at all times. With a lap-only belt, it actually makes the seatbelt less safe than without a booster. It's that much more risky in a lap-only belt. And so it always has to have a lap and shoulder belt. If it's an older vehicle and it might have a lap-only belt, then the middle seat is no longer the safest. If you are in a backless booster and you don't have that head support that comes from the booster seat, if there's no headrest behind, then it's no longer the safest. Or we wouldn't expect it to be. What if the seatbelt, if the booster seat is 11 or 12 inches wide and the seatbelt only is about 8 inches wide, and now the booster seat is sitting directly on top of the seatbelt? So the child can't access it. You can't buckle it. It might not be the safest if you can't access or buckle the seatbelt, right? If it doesn't have that good routing. So there's a few scenarios where the middle wouldn't be the safest. And then you'd want to safely install that booster seat and buckle them up on one of the two sides of the back seat. And the most important thing is that children in the back seat, we know that children between the ages of, all ages, but between the ages of 9 and 12 particularly, are safest in the back seat. And the recommendation is to not use the front seat, unless there is no choice, until age 13. So the back seat is really one of those things that's quite key as well.
That's with a booster seat. You wouldn't want to put a child in the front seat unless that was your only choice. Would you want to disengage the airbag?
Right. So if you have no choice, if you had 4 children and one was in a booster seat, first of all, you can't put a rear-facing car seat ever in the front seat when there's an active airbag, and most of our vehicles would have that. We're not getting into the weeds with the single cab trucks and whatnot. But so we would never put a rear facing car seat in a front seat. And there's labels all over it that says, please don't do this. But again, there are communities that need that support to know about it. You can't put a forward facing seat in the front seat because there's nowhere to tether it. And the tether, that strap on the top of the car seat, is required in Canada for all forward facing car seats. It reduces injury. We know it. And so Canada has made that required. And so you can only put a booster seat in a front seat. Okay, of again, a vehicle that has a back seat. And so when could you? So the booster seat has to allow being used in the front seat. Some booster seats say that they are prohibited from being used in front of an active airbag. Okay. And others might recommend against it, but they may have some kind of gray area there. So where the booster seat allows it, what you would do is make sure that child has the maturity to always sit correctly. You'd want them in the booster seat versus out. You want to make sure that adult seatbelt fits them correctly in that front passenger seat. You'd pull the front seat all the way back to reduce that risk of interaction with the airbag, okay? Because airbags are looking for an adult passenger, and we don't want them to interact with a child's smaller, less developed body and weaker bone structure as well. So we want to make sure that that doesn't have that interaction. And then we would make sure that that child has the maturity to not lean out of position, put their feet on the dash, lean forward to touch the console, the radio, to play with other things. They're going to sit there and they're going to know what the privilege that it comes with sitting in the front seat. And they'll know that this is only because today we need to transport 4 children, and they're the oldest, sturdiest, and most trustworthy who's going to sit in the front seat. So that's how you would make the front seat a safer option.
Thanks, Catherine. Alva, I know you probably have another question. What else do you want to know about booster seats?
Okay, so with my daughter being 10, although petite, and her friends are out of the, sometimes totally out already, I wonder what would be the indication, if it's not just about age, what would be the indication that a child is already ready to be out of a low back or a high back booster?
Right. So for a high back booster, it would be when they've outgrown the height on that booster, and when they have, like most children are out of the high back booster seat, or they've outgrown that shoulder adjustment when it starts to go below their shoulders, right? So when the seatbelt is no longer at or above their shoulders, it's starting to creep below, they may have outgrown that high back by height. But when are they ready to come out of a booster entirely? So what I want to tell you, Alva, is it depends on the vehicle. And so a child may fit safely in one vehicle on that seat, or even in one seat in the vehicle versus another earlier. And so you want to wait until that child, usually it happens around 4 feet 9 inches tall, or 57 inches tall, or 145 centimeters tall. Like, it's usually that height. On me, it's here. It might be lower on you, Alva. I'm not sure. Right? But 4 feet 9 inches tall is generally where they start to fit. But I've seen children who fit safely at 4 feet 7, at 4 feet 8, and some children who don't fit in their vehicles at 4 feet 9 inches tall, and they need to be taller to fit in their vehicles. So what we're looking for, there's 5 different steps. So we're looking for their back to be flat against the vehicle seat. Okay. We're looking for their knees to bend comfortably over the edge of the vehicle seat. And we're mostly looking for their feet to be flat on the floor as well. Right? That's a good indicator. It's not required to fit, but it's a pretty good indicator, because if their feet don't fit on the floor, well, I'll tell you what, the next step is that the lap belt needs to fit low on their hips and touching the tops of their thighs. We don't want it up over their belly. We don't want it on their stomach. Okay. We want it to be low, and we want the shoulder belt to fit between their neck and shoulder, not down over their shoulder, not up over their face or on their neck, between their neck and shoulder, and snug on their body. And we want them to be able to maintain this position for the whole ride, because there are some 8 and 9-year-olds who can scooch all the way back and they look really well. And you can look at their lap belt and you're like, wow, that's a pretty good seatbelt fit. That looks great. And then they relax. And then you're there for long enough that they start to slouch a little bit. And when your knees don't bend over the edge and when your feet don't touch the floor, what happens, right? Your bum will slide out until your knees touch. And now this kind of like curved C position means that lap belt is up over your soft abdomen. It's no longer on your strongest bones touching the tops of your thighs. And that shoulder belt edges up around your neck or over your face. And then it's uncomfortable. And so then kids will move out of position. The belt will be here and they'll be over there, or they'll unsafely tuck it under their arm, or they might move it behind their back. And so that is the trick, they need to be able to sit correctly in that position with the lap and shoulder belt fitting them appropriately. And they need to be able to maintain that for the whole ride. And so in some cases, you'll see a kiddo in like the captain's chair of a van. Yeah. And you're like, ooh, I know you're 11, kiddo, but you just do not fit that seatbelt safely. And so you can have that conversation to be like, I noticed the seats in the third row of the van are shorter. They're lower to the ground. And sometimes you can move a child to that third row and get a better seatbelt fit. Or even in a sedan, you might find that we've got like 2 really, long captain's chairs and kind of a little tiny middle seat that's got like a divot, and it might be shorter. The backrest might be closer to the child, and they may be able to maintain that position better in the middle back seat. And so when can they get out of a booster? The truth is they may get out of a booster seat in one car or in one position much earlier than they'll be able to ditch the booster seat entirely. So it's kind of a process. Like with technicians' kids who are in the know, I know that my daughter was in a booster seat until 10. She had a very big growth spurt, and she is no longer in a booster seat in any of the cars that we transport her in. But between 10 and 11, there were a few cars where she still needed to have that booster seat. And so we did buy kind of a shorter, flatter, booster seat that we could just kind of keep in the trunk in case we needed it. But that's the trick, is that there's no one age when they could be out of all booster seats. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a period of transition for the safest recommendation for safety.
So lots of great tips here. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back. Nearly 3 decades ago, Amazon set out to be Earth's most customer-centric company, where people can discover and purchase the widest possible selection of safe and authentic goods. As part of that mission, they obsess over earning and maintaining trust by ensuring that they provide a trustworthy shopping experience. Amazon is dedicated to helping you make informed choices and use your purchases safely. Visit www.amazon.ca/product safety and usage and explore expert tips, articles, and videos from our partners to ensure a secure shopping experience. Okay, before the break, we were answering Jane and Alva's questions, which got into a lot of great information and great detail for the booster seat complexities. They seem to be a more straightforward and simple seat than what a car seat and a rear-facing seat look like. But there is some complexities in those kids fitting in the seat fitting in the car, and then where to transition in and out of a booster seat. So there's lots of information that we need to access. Jane and Alva, where did you go to find some of the information that you were looking for when you were considering booster seats? Jane, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I went online. I have a background in injury prevention. I remembered it in the back of my mind. That was pre-baby Jane. That was a bit blurry. So I definitely went online, and I used mom groups too on social media to ask some questions. But I got a lot of different information sometimes. And so is there a good one place to go would be awesome to know as well.
What kind of answers were you looking for?
Is this a good one? Right. I remember it went on sale at Costco when I was taking a picture and is this a good one? Is a forever as good as it sounds? Where do I put it? When we were having discussions about the middle versus the side, et cetera,
right.
Placement and brands.
Yeah, that's a really common question for all kinds of car seats is, which is the best one? And I think what we've learned over the conversation with this is there is no one best, that there's a lot of different components that
Wouldn't
go
that
into
make our
that.
jobs so much simpler as parents and as injury prevention professionals here? So that's information that's kind of hard for myself to give. What is the best car seat? And I know Pam and I've talked about it before, that the best car seat is the one that's going to fit your child, so it meets their height and weight. It's going to fit in your vehicle, right? It's not any good to be the safest car seat if you won't even go in the door, right? So it needs to fit in your vehicle. It needs to fit your budget. And it also needs to be the one that you're going to use on every ride. And so for some folks, they want that one car seat and they're going to move it for every vehicle and every situation. That's the car seat and they're dragging it around. And for others, I know Alva has a small collection of car seats and booster seats that she might provide to grandparents and friends and babysitters and people who are taking her daughter, or maybe that she's keeping it on hand so that when her daughter's friends come over, that she has safe options for them too. And so it really just depends on what you want to do. And what you're looking at in a car seat. Just be aware that those reviews you see on websites or, that sometimes they're from parents and caregivers who didn't know how to use the feature that they're complaining about. And so sometimes you read those reviews and I'll read the reviews and I go, oh, that had a really cool feature that they just missed. they're using it wrong and they're frustrated at this point, but that's not a bad car seat. They're just, they missed this part, right?
Yep.
And so I guess it would be best to find places that have people who have training, who aren't trying to sell you anything, people who are there, providing that information. I know that, Parachute and Child Safety Link and the Child Passenger Safety Association of Canada don't promote or endorse, or Transport Canada, for example, we don't promote or endorse specific products or rate them in any way. Like, we don't have an ease of use rating in Canada. We know that if a car seat has that national safety mark in Canada, it means that it met those high Canadian standards. It's a pass or fail system. If it's on the shelves and it has the national safety mark on it, then it is a safe product when used as directed. And so I guess the best advice might be to look for, those blogs that have child passenger safety technicians, who can give you the pros and cons of booster seats. I mean, any website that says this is the best car seat or booster seat, they're not an educated group, right? But if you're looking for someone who's giving you the pros, this one's, has really interesting features that make it easier to use. Cons, it's really heavy. You need to know that, right? Whereas you might have another one that, like, pros, this is a really lightweight car seat. Cons, it might be difficult for a grandparent to use, right?
Right.
Because you
And
have
those
to
are
explain this part, or you need to help them with this part. So, you need to kind of figure out who's giving those reviews that include all of that information.
And I think what you just touched on, Catherine, is really important. Like we started off, there's the technical pieces of information or considerations, but then there's also things like use and how old is your child and how do you get them to stay in a car seat when their friends, as you said, Alva, are transitioning out because they are a different height and weight, etc. But Alva, where the information that you were looking for, you said you traveled a lot. Where did you look for information about? Because that's an interesting component of, where do I buy a good car seat or a good booster seat, but that is good for traveling, for putting on an airplane or using once you get to your location.
I think it started when thankfully, at least for the IWK, they teach you how to use your bucket seat, your very first seat. And then, of course, they would say, oh, this information comes from this website, right? And then, so that's a start. And then ended up being with the same mommy group with Catherine. And then that started it all. And to follow through with what was said, I think when it comes to the complexities of car seats, I don't think there's what you call bad parents. There's only not informed parents or misinformed parents. So informing them is empowering them to be able to provide what's best for their children, which every parent wants. So for me, I got my information first and foremost at the hospital, and then ended up being in the same mommy group as Catherine. So I already forever had her as a contact. I'm wondering if there are car seats that travel well, whether it's high back or low back booster, that would be easy to take along when families travel frequently.
Absolutely. So what I will say about travel seats is when you have a forward-facing harness seat like Jane has, that is something that can go on an airplane. I know, Alva, that you fly a lot. And so a forward-facing harness seat, all of the car seats that are, certified in Canada can be used on an aircraft. They don't all fit all seats. And so a wider, deeper one might not fit the particular plane seat that you're traveling on, but they are approved for aircraft use. So a booster seat, which is the focus here, is not, you cannot use a booster seat on an airplane. Do you remember what we said about a booster seat? That it always needed the lap and shoulder belt. And so in an airplane with a lap-only belt, it would increase the risk of injury. So we do want you, of course, to have your booster seat with you because we want you to be safe when you get to the other side. You're likely getting into a rideshare, a taxi, a grandma's car who's picking you up at the airport. However, something, yes, we want to make sure you have it with you. And so what I recommend is the one that gives your child a consistent fit. So if there's a booster seat that you find fits well in some cars, but might not fit well in all cars, and it's difficult to use and it's hard to use when your kid is tired, I would leave that one at home. I would look for the one that is lightweight, small, has a small impact, but is also one that you can use consistently from vehicle to vehicle, right? Because you don't know what the car is on the other end. So it's just the one that you have a consistent fit in. And there's lots of little, standard booster seats now that are fairly inexpensive, less than $40, that all have that kind of similar small shape and lightweight. And I would just recommend, honestly, sometimes people just attach a strap to, like tie a strap onto each armrest, and then the child can carry it as a personal effect, and they don't seem to count it as luggage. Basically, if you are holding it in your hands, it doesn't seem to count. But other people will just have that child put it in a backpack, put it in a carry-on, put it in a bag that they put over their shoulder. It's important to keep it on the plane with you when you can.
Right.
Because you want to make sure that if your luggage gets lost, that booster seat arrives with you. Because if it's an overnight and it's midnight, it's 4 a.m., whatever time that you fly in, sometimes the airlines will have a car seat to replace it with, but they don't always have one that's going to fit your child, right? We don't know the safety of those seats. Where did they get them? They're not always new. And same with rental car companies, right? So they do sometimes offer the ability to rent a car seat, but it might not be one that meets your child's needs or fits their height, weight, and development at this time. And so that's really challenging. So you want to make sure that it comes with you. That is my big advice. And I do talk to a lot of families who are traveling down south and they're only intending to take a taxi or rideshare once or twice. And so we work with them to find something that's going to be lightweight and small. And usually, if a child's used to a high back booster, many people travel with the backless. And I just talk to them, make sure they have head support to the tops of their ears, lap and shoulder belt every time, forward-facing vehicle seat, not a side-facing jump seat or a rear-facing like limousine seat, or, because some of those transports have rear-facing seats sometimes. And so just talking to the caregivers about what is the most important things. And then because it's usually mom who's going to sit or a caregiver who's sitting beside them, making sure that they stay in position when they're sleepy and it's the middle of the night and they're used to using a high back booster seat.
Thank you so much, Jane, Alva, Catherine. The questions that you have, I know, will be the ones that parents are asking. I'm sure they're probably making a list of others. We will make sure that there's a list of links in the podcast show notes so that people can access credible places for information. I really appreciate the time you've taken to join us and to ask your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. Popping the Bubble Wrap is a podcast of Parachute, Canada's national injury prevention charity. We release episodes monthly. Visit us at parachute.ca and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parachute Canada. Don't keep us a secret, though. Help other parents find this podcast by sharing the link to Popping the Bubble Wrap and taking a second to submit a review. It really does help. Popping the Bubble Wrap is produced by Story Studio Network.